Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Voice of Security webinar brought to you today by Tynes and AWS. My name is Matt Muller, and I'm the field CISO here at Tynes. I get the privilege of working with security leaders at customers of all different industries and sizes on their security automation strategies, figuring out how we can help them use Tynes to power some of their most important workflows. I am joined today by an amazing co-host, Cheryl Cage from AWS. And Cheryl, I will allow you to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, this is going to be great today. And I'm happy, Matt's here along with me. I'm Cheryl Cage. I am a principal security strategist at AWS. The team I'm on, we run the Global Security and Compliance Acceleration Program, or GSCA for short, because it's a big, long name. What we do is we focus on helping customers and partners meet regulatory compliance in healthcare, financial services, public sector, and privacy. And I've been at AWS now a little over 5 years. And before AWS, I was focused on leading FedRAMP and DoD advisory and assessments. And I also have that vast experience in SOC 2, ISO, HITRUST, and PCI, all that fun compliance stuff.
I feel like sometimes if there's two classes of people, right? The people that call it fun compliance stuff, and the people that actually think compliance is fun. And I'm in that camp. I think those are actually fun topics. But today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We are going to be reviewing the IDC's Voice of Security report for 2025. So this was a survey of 900 and some odd security leaders from across the globe, and Cheryl and I have both read through their findings, and we've got some interesting tidbits and takeaways that we're going to call out today here. Talk about what it means for security teams, and then ultimately have a Q&A. So just in terms of how housekeeping works for the next couple minutes that we all have together, Cheryl and I will be presenting on the report itself and some of our takeaways, and then we're going to have Q&A at the end. But feel free to throw questions in the chat. We will answer as many of them as we can as we get towards the end of the event today. And also, today's webinar is going to be recorded. So if you're not able to stay for the whole thing live, absolutely not a problem. You'll be able to get access to a recorded copy of this later. And of course, you'll also be able to find a copy of the report itself as well. So with that, let's talk a little bit first about the IDC Voice of Security report. 915 security leaders from all around the world participated in this, in putting this report together, answering the survey questions. And honestly, first of all, to those folks, I just want to say thank you, because let's face it, security leaders and security teams are just incredibly busy these days. And so to take time out of your day and answer these survey questions is both a meaningful investment of time, but also, really helps all of us, right? Because it often can be incredibly helpful to know, what our peers are doing and what they're thinking. And, just sort of being able to benchmark ourselves, right, against, how other security leaders operate. And I think because these leaders come from such diverse backgrounds, both in terms of where they are in the world, the seniority and where they are at in their careers, as well as just differences in how different regions think about cybersecurity. There are definitely some interesting slicing and dicing of the data that can be done. But the stats that we're pulling out here today are some interesting commonalities, right? Things that we've seen across, security teams of multiple different sizes, and so, just sort of knowing that regardless of where you're at, there are some things that a lot of security teams have in common can definitely be a little bit of a comfort or maybe a little bit alarming, depending on how you think about it. But, again, these are stats that I think at a high level really represent a cross section of the security teams out there. And of course, the report itself, if you end up wanting to get a copy of that, does contain some more detailed breakdowns. But again, thank you to everyone who participated in this. It's really meaningful to have you all, share the data. So the way that we're talking through our findings in the report today is sort of a classic approach of people, process, and technology. And so we're going to start out today talking about people and talking about security teams. And Cheryl, I would really love to get your perspective on, I know you work with a lot of different types of companies. What stands out to you in terms of these stats around, security teams and the impact that they're having?
Yeah, and I work anywhere from early stage startups all the way to enterprise, and just the state of business today, right now, is teams are being asked to do more with limited resources. It's just how it is. Even my team, we're a team of 8, right? And we support in our program, we have 63 partners, and we're a global program. So how do we do that? You have to, yeah, and we continue to deliver strong results, right? But showing an organization's success isn't just limited by your team size. You want to it's about focusing on, to me, building smart systems, leveraging the right tools, and empowering people to take ownership and work efficiently. So, but then I will also say, on the flip side of that, what speaks to me in these stats right here is, there's resilience and expertise on those small teams getting things done and executing, but then it also raises the sustainability concerns, right? How long can teams keep pace, that fast pace, without burnout or risk exposure to your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would be curious as well, as you've seen, over the past couple of years. I mean, do these trends, did you say these are representative of how things have, like workloads have been increasing over the past couple of years? Does this feel like an anomaly to you?
This does not feel like an anomaly to me at all. But what I will say that helps with, and I said leveraging it underscores the need for strategic investments, and leveraging partner solutions and cloud services to automate those things and repetitive tasks to fill the gaps where you have those limited resources or limited knowledge. And using that risk-based prioritization to make the smartest possible decisions to protect your organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's probably the only way that these teams can, have any hope of maintaining some of their sanity, right? I mean, the fact that 60% of security teams have fewer than 10 people on them, these are teams that absolutely have to, maximize every single possible resource at their disposal. And granted, these numbers are a snapshot, right? But the fact that almost 90% of these teams, even with increased workloads, and even with the limited resources that they have, the fact that they're like meeting or exceeding targets is really impressive. So congrats to these teams. I guess my final thought that I have, and I don't know that I have an answer to this, is do we think that this 88% is going to be higher or lower next year, just given the increased workloads? That, I think, is the real question to me.
No, that's a great question. But it's all about, I think this day and age, it's just focusing less on headcount and more how you can empower your teams with the right technologies and building out streamlined processes.
Yeah, absolutely. Just being able to decouple, headcount from workloads is absolutely critical. Looking at the security leaders that are managing these teams, we asked them what drives job satisfaction, and I think, to me, the thing here that really stands out is both that these things are unsurprising, right? To me, learning new things absolutely does lead to increased job satisfaction, right? And being able to incorporate human creativity in the work that I'm doing, and the fact that, let's face it, I think a lot of us got into cybersecurity because every day looks a little bit different. All of these things absolutely resonate with me. However, I will say one of the things that stood out is that these are questions being asked of security leaders. And a lot of what I see here sort of looks applicable whether you're a leader or an individual contributor. And I was sort of thinking about why that might be. And I have a couple hypotheses. The first is, the fact that cybersecurity is, in fact, a very, very technical field, and it changes constantly, right? Like, I think it's difficult to be a leader in cybersecurity unless you're opening yourself up to learning new things constantly. But I also think there's something to be said as well around the fact that I see a lot of folks in cybersecurity who are sort of player coaches, where they may be leading a team, but they also have a whole bunch to contribute themselves. And we've sort of seen how CISOs have these incredibly demanding jobs these days, where they have to be both 100% technical and also 100% business oriented, and somehow manage to fit that into a normal workday. And I think it'll be very interesting to see over time, particularly as security tries to move from being the team of no to being the team that supports the business, whether this will change, right? Like I sort of wonder whether security leaders in the future will say, the thing that really drives job satisfaction for me is collaboration and partnership with other teams or things like that. But yeah, Cheryl, I'd also be curious to hear if you had any takes on this as well. Just what hypotheses you might have around what's around these job satisfaction indications.
I couldn't agree more with everything that you said, because in the tech and being in the cybersecurity space, we have to learn so much every day. So it's information overload every day, but we have AI is rapidly transforming the landscapes. You've got automation that can handle repetitive tasks, but then the human ingenuity factor also remains irreplaceable in the AI world, right?
Right.
And to me, like, people need meaningful work, not just tasks. They want to innovate and to create that engagement with their team. And then if you can simplify a process or have a new idea, it reduces frustration on the team. So if you can figure out something better, use that creative side of your brain, which is, I'm a creative brain myself. So, and I'm in the compliance field, which isn't always like sexy or exciting, right? But at AWS, they encourage us to use our creative side through our leadership principles. And it's like, learn and be curious. So if there's something I want to learn, I can go into my AWS instance and start playing around with the new services, thinking big and inventing and simplifying. So when we're discussing ideas or new projects or deciding on the best way to solve a problem, that can just be a small change that makes a big difference, or it can be a brand new idea. But that certainly, and then when you see an idea or something that you did launched it at reInvent, that really makes you feel more fulfilled, and that you can make a difference, with just talking to one another and brainstorming and figuring these things out.
Totally. And it's funny you mentioned, creativity in compliance as well. I mean, I can't tell you the number of security questionnaires that I've answered where, they say, hey, please tell us how you secure your data center. And I'm like, well, we use AWS. And they're like, no, but like, do you have, like key card access? Like, how do you protect your actual physical data center? I'm like, there's no data center. Right. We use AWS, right? And so, people have to be flexible and learn new things about, cloud workloads and how people secure their solutions and shared responsibility models and all those sorts of things. So yeah, totally agree.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think in general, I completely agree with what you said, right? That people need the creativity and they want to just, they want to be able to create solutions, not just do tasks. And, I think some of that leads into, how people think about work-life balance as well. So, Cheryl, I mean, you work with so many different types of organizations. Who are these leaders that have a healthy work-life balance, and how do I find them?
I don't know. This one kind of threw me for a loop, because it was a little eye-opening for me. And this is an area where I can fail miserably some days, because, I try to maintain my work-life balance, but it's hard when you're getting pinged all day, and then, by email or messaging apps, and then you have back-to-back meetings. So when can you actually get your work done, right? Mm-hmm. Later on, usually after hours. So yeah, this one, and for me, for the leaders, which I'm surprised by, because most of the leaders I know of are bogged down as well. So that's why I was pretty surprised. But the data to me shows that there's a concerning disconnect between leadership and frontline experiences here. So being a leader, you need to identify this gap and actively seek feedback from your teams to create a more sustainable work environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I almost wonder if there's an element here of boiling the frog as well as people advance in their cybersecurity careers, right? Where, it might feel perfectly normal to you as an executive to work a 60-hour week, right? And to be constantly online and answering to pings on the weekend. And because you've just developed these habits over time, you're like, oh yeah, I had dinner with the family, right? So I was able to balance out work with some personal time here. So I almost wonder if security leaders may have been almost too immersed in always on culture, right? And folks that are more junior on their team that are experiencing these things are like, no, I actually would like to be able to get dinner with my family and not think about work. I'm curious, like, do you think that might be an element there as well?
I actually think that's a great perspective because I think that's just the time that we live in now is that, everything's on our phones. We can respond to email. We can go out to dinner and take a quick look at an email or, do it on the fly when we're traveling. So yes, I 100% agree with what you said. But and then on the flip side of this, as I mentioned in on the last slide there, all this can lead to burnout though. And then that can lead to reduced, productivity. It can reduce, higher turnover, and then ultimately an increased risk exposure in critical business functions, right? And maybe that then leads to higher costs for the organization as they need to backfill those roles or upskill other team members or find alternative solutions. So we need to find the good balance there, and I'm not sure I have the full answers for that because, like I said, I don't follow this 100% myself. So.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was talking to a security leader yesterday, actually, and we were sort of commiserating because we were talking about burnout and the fact that it's so easy as a security leader to spot it in somebody on your team, but almost impossible to spot it in ourselves.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I actually look at this 83% number, and I'm like, this might be a warning sign to security leaders. So maybe do a little bit of introspection, right? And ask yourself, are you in fact actually maintaining a healthy balance here? Are you just telling yourself that so you don't spiral?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And so as these security leaders are engaging in their beautiful healthy work-life balance here, that doesn't mean that they don't wish they had more time. And I think it is again sort of tying back to the fact that what gives a lot of leaders job satisfaction is the stuff around developing creative solutions. This tells me that a lot of security leaders are stuck in the toil of day to day, right? Because ultimately, the most valuable thing that you can do is, develop new policies for the security team and the security organization, right? Like these are the guiding documents that help govern and set the direction for your entire cybersecurity program, right? And so the fact that nearly half of leaders want more time specifically for that type of work tells me that, again, I think security teams might be stuck in a little bit of a toil loop. Wanting more time for incident response planning. They might want that time because they're actually responding to incidents, right? And planning for them might help reduce the number of incidents that occur. So I definitely think that this to me, what this really says is, security leaders who could free up a little bit of time and reduce some of the toil in their day. They know that to me, this is spot on. This is exactly where I would expect a security leader to want to spend more time. But I'm curious, Cheryl, if this is something you've seen as well, or if you see folks that have been, maybe more successful in carving out some of these opportunities. How does this resonate with you?
No, I think this is spot on too. Like, leaders want to shift from, reactive to proactive work.
Mhm.
We all do, but sometimes that can be hard. Like we were talking about, if you're getting pinged all day or you're putting out fires, and it can lead you from focusing on, that long-term security strategy. But to me, like, training is a necessity here, utilizing and growth and development plans for your teams too. Enlisting your teams to come up with some of these ideas to be, more proactive rather than reactive too, and have a brainstorming session with them and working together to achieve your goal. I think that's what a lot of these teams that I work with, they want to all be engaged and work together and collaborate to make the organization and your security, posture a success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, picking up on something you said there as well, I mean, training and development for your team is in a lot of ways, I feel, an extension of training and development for you as a leader, right? Like I don't have to become an expert in, AI security specifically. I may want to develop some knowledge, but if I invest in having my team develop deep expertise there, where I might not have the time or capacity, that's, and having that trusted relationship for somebody to be able to say to me, hey, this is how we should be thinking about these things. I mean, that's such a valuable tool. And summarizing, I guess I would just say delegation, right? Like, but to me, this represents a little bit of like just delegate a little bit more, right? And really leverage that team.
Yeah, I agree. And then I'm also just going to throw in there too, to free up some of your time and your team's time, leveraging automation,
Mm,
cloud-based tools and
yep.
services to enhance all of this for you, so you can focus on business at hand, and utilize these tools that are already doing these repetitive tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thinking about how leaders measure their organizations, there were a couple common metrics that stood out here. And, Cheryl, I'd love to get your take on this, both in terms of, what you've seen organizations actually implementing, as well as what they're not thinking about or what they should be implementing.
Yeah, to me, so you need to measure what matters, not just what's easy to count. Um, the right metrics don't just track performance, they're driving improvement and they're aligning with your security and business plans. And I would also state to this, from these metrics, like, you need to think about your security framework controls that are in scope for your organization too, right? Because those are going to help drive what you need to track to show evidence, that you are alerting, that you're monitoring, that you're triaging, all these threats in your environment. Ultimately, like, working backwards from that to achieve, your goals as an organization for what you should be tracking, would really help.
Yeah, absolutely. And, something that stood out to me on this one as well is that, people measure like 35% of organizations measure the number of incidents handled. And, I often worry and sometimes see organizations falling into a little bit of this trap, which is mistaking guardrail metrics for goal metrics. And, yes, you do want to know how many incidents you're handling, right? That is an important number. But that in and of itself isn't a goal or target to hit, right? 0 incidents is I think an unrealistic number, but also it's never particularly clear, given that adversaries are clever and adversaries are constantly changing their attack techniques and what have you. Just saying, we're going to reduce the number of incidents, doesn't actually serve as a very clear goal, right? I completely agree that, thinking about, what you want to measure in terms of how your organization changes behavior, right, to improve those metrics is so important. Um, and yeah, I mean, I guess, any other, have you seen other metrics that you think are maybe particularly effective in terms of organizations, setting those as targets and setting those as measurements?
It's the ones that I've seen, usually they align to the compliance frameworks. So they're
Mm,
they're all about making sure that they have, they're threading out how many threats are they actively blocking, or have they actively, have they built anomalies for, right? So you want that anomaly detection and making sure that you are, monitoring every single one of these, and that you have that chain of custody on how you are handling it from start to finish. That's where I see a lot of these, a lot of metrics, with the way I'm working with partners and customers.
yeah, and I love that, right? Because ultimately what matters to the board is like, are we running an effective program? And they measure that through those frameworks. And so if we're not tying our work to ultimately what the board cares about, then there's certainly a little bit of a disconnect there. So, talking about just how people go about achieving their goals and achieving their metrics and so on and so forth. One of the things that we asked about were tools. Almost every security team I know of has some degree of tooling, but honestly, like, some of these numbers shocked me a little bit in terms of just actual quantity. And yeah, Cheryl, I mean, like, what do you take? Like, what is your takeaway here, just in terms of like the tooling and integration stacks and all those things.
I was a little surprised by the amount of tools, but I work in the the security compliance space. So when I do architecture reviews, I actually see how many different tools are inside an environment. And sometimes, yes, I am very surprised by that too. And what organizations also need to think about, is having a million tools to do point solutions doesn't always help. Like those solutions should be actively talking to one another and be integrated, so you have a single pane of glass into your environment, and how to care and feed each one of those, right? So one person if they're assigned to this one app or tool set and they leave the organization, how do you know if everything's secure, everything's been worked on that? How do you know? So just keep having that single pane of glass, having interoperability with your tool set to make sure that it's achieving your goals, as an organization. And more isn't always better. So
right. Yeah. And, to me, I mean, 24% of security leaders citing poor integration as a major challenge. To me, that implies that 3 out of 4 leaders think that it's not. Does that track with what you're seeing?
Yes, because I get asked what tool sets should be used a lot for specifically how to meet controls for a compliance framework, really. But I am also going to say, though, these tool sets, what's being done to ensure that the third-party risk and security implications that each tool may introduce to your environment, how do those align with your current security policies and frameworks, right? How does that tool store, collect, and process data? Where's all that data stored? And do you have regional compliance requirements around that? And is that data encrypted at rest and in transit? So it's just taking that risk-based approach to evaluate the security tools that you want to use in your environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know that there's a correct answer for the exact right number of tools to have in an environment, right? And I imagine this is probably a little bit different for very large organizations versus very small ones. But I think there is always going to be that tension between the fact that it's better to, in my view, to have tools, maybe a couple tools that really, really well. And are really effective for you versus buying a new point solution every single day. That said, the business adopts new technologies constantly, right? And sometimes only a point solution is going to help you secure that effectively. And so, to me, I think this represents a little bit of that inherent tension between trying to get the most out of the tools you have versus the fact that again, we're dealing with new challenges every single day, and sometimes you just need a new tool to be able to go protect it.
100% agree. But my add-on to that would be, with all the different security threats with AI and everything else right now, just to do the due diligence to ensure it's aligning with your compliance and operational needs. Granted, yes, it might be the only solution that fits for yours, but just make sure that it's meeting your security, and operational needs as you're moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, you brought up AI, and of course, we have to talk about AI because everybody's talking about AI, and certainly the security leaders that we talk to are thinking about AI as well. And looking at these numbers and also what they're measuring, I was really struck by the fact that if this survey had been done, I don't know, 2 years ago even, I don't think the numbers would look anything like this, right? Where 20% of security leaders are frustrated by slow AI implementation. 2 years ago, I think 100% of CISOs would have been alarmed by any AI implementation, right? And just trying to control sort of that the shadow AI or shadow IT stack, however you want to call it. And so, to me, what this really represents is the fact that I think AI as a tool in and of itself has really started to stabilize a little bit. And to me, again, I think these feel like in a lot of ways, I feel like these are the right concerns, or certainly the most resonant concerns that I see, right? Where Everyone was worried about AI hallucinations, in the past. But when you start thinking about AI as, just a predictive model, we have tools for dealing with predictions, right? And ways to sort of safeguard and double check to make sure that the AI or whatever output we're getting is actually trustworthy, right? Like that is not a new problem. The only new problem is making sure that the rest of the organization also knows that AI is not infallible, right? It can be very, very good, but almost never perfect. And yeah, the only one that stands out to me here in particular is around focusing on the security of AI adoption. To me, this feels like an area where I would expect a lot more leaders to be focusing their time and attention and energy. Mostly because, I think for us as security people, AI represents a way to really almost reset how the organization thinks about their security team and the role that they serve, right? Where we all know that AI tools are going to make their way into the organization, and this is a chance for security leaders to be able to say, "Hey, we understand that the tooling is coming in. We want to help the business grow. We want to help the business succeed, and we've been spending our time thinking about ways for you to do that safely." Right, and sort of serving in that trusted advisor role across the organization. Again, it feels like a great opportunity, and I would really hope to see a whole bunch more security leaders putting time and effort into thinking about how to secure AI adoption across the enterprise. But yeah, Cheryl, from your end, anything that stands out to you here, or things that you saw in these numbers?
Well, yeah, to me, well, AI is really only as effective as the teams using it. So you
Mhm.
just have to make sure you're investing in the continuous learning programs with this and hands-on experimentation, right, for your teams. And also, you brought up the security of it, right? So that's definitely something that everyone needs to, because there's different threats around AI coming up every day, and the compliance challenges are rapidly revolving or evolving. I'm sorry, around AI. So right now you have the big three for AI compliance, right? You've got the EU AI Act, you have the NIST AI RMF or Risk Management Framework, and then you have ISO 42001. And organizations need to embed that compliance early on into their AI initiatives by leveraging the governance frameworks and risk-based prioritization. It To me, because this also will help you not to incur that technical debt later on as you're thinking about what sort of security implications may occur. Because like I said, AI is just a target for attackers there, and security teams need to do the same things that they do with any other technology, right? You're going to zero trust access. You need data encryption. You need model integrity checks, continuous monitoring. So, and if you're using third-party AI tools, you need to ensure that they have those practices in place too. So that's just my 2 cents on that. It's just making sure that you are, like you said, securing those AI workloads. That's the biggest thing here. So don't open it up to have ChatGPT on and everyone's doing everything they want, putting your IP in there and all of that. Make sure that you have all of that locked down and secure in-house.
Absolutely, yeah. We as a security, industry have a window of opportunity to make sure that these things get implemented the right way. But that window is not going to be open forever because people start using those cart trails, right? Even if we don't build them roads. But I think looking at AI, particularly around how security teams are using AI, I imagine AWS is working with a lot of folks that are leveraging, platforms like Bedrock and what have you to implement some AI use cases. Cheryl, how do these resonate with you, just in terms of what you're seeing security teams using AI for?
Yeah, and this totally resonates with me. I think this is pretty spot on from what I'm seeing too. And like you mentioned, Bedrock, or we have like GuardDuty has intelligent threat detection built in now. So it's just utilizing, instead of drowning in alerts, we can correlate signals now across multiple sources. We can highlight those critical threats, and suggest those response strategies for you. So it's helping organizations in this way. So, they're not, searching through a bunch of logs and we're going to bring that to you in that like single pane of glass, like I was discussing, to be so you can move faster and get ahead of a lot of these threats that are occurring.
Absolutely. One thing that stands out to me here is when you look at these use cases, none of them say replace my entire SOC, right? A lot of these seem very much driven around, enhancing, analyst and security engineering workflows, versus saying, hey, we're actually going to, eliminate headcount, right, by using AI. That certainly tracks with, I think, what I've seen around AI capabilities. But does that resonate with what you're seeing customers do as well?
100%. So AI isn't bulletproof, right? So that human expertise remains irreplaceable. So the most successful, I think, security teams will be those that embrace AI, like you said, as a trusted advisor, and then combining automation with human judgment. So I really think that's what we're currently seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think these adoption numbers are interesting as well, just in terms of summarization being a classic AI use case, and one that it's actually really good at. Versus, I think what organizations may be realizing as you look at things like using AI for advanced triage is, much like a human analyst, you have to be able to tell the AI, what your process is in order for it to execute that process effectively. And I think maybe organizations are starting to discover, oh, our process is a little bit more tribal knowledge than than maybe we realized at first, right? And I think to me that's something that's super important as organizations are thinking about, throwing AI into more use cases, is just remembering that it does need that context, right? And it'll be most effective if it has some way of understanding your organization a little bit more effectively than just sort of, blindly being an AI coming in off the street, so to speak, and just trying to blindly throw that at stuff.
Absolutely. You have to let it learn your business for sure. So
Awesome. Well, we are getting close to the end of the presentation portion here, which means if folks have questions about anything that we've chatted about so far, would definitely encourage you to throw those questions into the chat, and we'll be able to add those into the Q&A. But for now, I think having had a chance to sit with this report for a little while now and digest all of its contents, there's a couple insights that I think, Cheryl, I know you came up with a few, and I've had a few as well, but yeah, we would love to hear sort of your thoughts around, recommendations for security team, just based on what we've heard about people, process, and technology today.
The traditional view of, security, operations as purely reactive needs that fundamental, transformation. So we should reframe human creativity not just as a nice to have, but also as a cornerstone for, your modern security strategy. Creating innovation time for your team, that's going to, help them with, drive the organization to a better place. Having like cross-functional groups that blend security expertise with, your business strategy, because you want the business aligned, right, on what your strategy is. And I'm also going to say, use automation for areas that are repetitive for you, so you can utilize that time for, for other things in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that my takeaways here was around just how people can approach integrating automation and integrating AI into the work that they're doing. I mean, we've talked about it a couple times now, right? Where security teams are just stuck in the toil of doing all the routine tasks. But I think one of the failure modes that teams can see when they try to implement automation is trying to do everything all at once. And so, you end up in this very, very long cycle of trying to implement automation, but, not actually having it make a difference because, again, it turns out that, process can be very complex, particularly in a large organization. And so teams need to think about, decomposing these problems and finding bite-sized ways that they can integrate automation into their workflows. And on the AI side as well, I think one of the things that has been really just sort of mind blowing about the whole AI industry is just how fast everything is growing and changing and improving. And seeing how, yesterday's foundation model that was the pinnacle of AI performance is now just fine, right? And the one that got launched today is now able to solve problems that AI previously wasn't able to. And so I think having an approach that allows using AI in particular in a way that maybe you find some use cases today where AI is helpful and that's fantastic, and some where it's not. Being able to sort of plug and play different AI approaches is super important, because a problem that you can't solve with AI today because it just doesn't take an effective approach to it doesn't mean you can't do it tomorrow, right? And being able to take advantage of those technology improvements as they occur is super important. Any other recommendations, Cheryl, that stand out to you for security teams?
To me, it was kind of the tool, going back to the tool set
Mm,
conversation. It's just trying to reduce that complexity and so you can improve efficiency. So having that well integrated, security stack to just minimize friction, and it's enabling, faster decision making and more effective defenses in order for, your organization to be able to implement some of these other things that you want to do. And you first need to, like you said, take a slow approach, right? Take the slow approach to adopting AI. Maybe you want to, pick some low hanging fruit there to start with. And then as you keep moving up the stack to tackle some of those more difficult issues that you have.
absolutely. And then at the end, you got to measure it all, right? You got to make sure that you're measuring both the quality of the AI output, as well as how it ties to your overall security program goals. And ultimately, at the end of the day, being able to map the work that we do back to those overall, cybersecurity frameworks, like you mentioned, I feel like it just really helps teams sort of take the work that they're doing and understand how it actually drives improvement, right? And actually drives the maturity of their overall cybersecurity programs. That's so important to me. And hopefully teams are thinking about these things in terms of, again, how are we maturing the overall program, and how are we measuring that maturity versus sort of, hey, we took this one task and now we automated it, but what does that actually mean, right, for the overall program? All right. I think that we have covered just about everything that we have to cover, which means it is time for questions. And I see a couple popping into the chat here already. And I will grab them and we will go through as many as we can. All right, so let's see here. A question about the IDC report itself. Where leaders asked about keeping up with vendor solutions and new technologies that help them become more cyber resilient. The report didn't cover that directly. I think it was a little bit more high level, just in terms of overall tool stack. But I mean, there's a lot of vendor solutions out there. Cheryl, what are some of the conversations that you have around vendor solutions and cyber resilience and all those things?
Well, it usually always goes back to cyber resilience, goes back to a security framework for me.
Mm,
And every security framework has continuity, disaster recovery, resilience baked into that. And even with so what I'm seeing is we have a lot of AWS services that can certainly help there with that. So we've got a resilience hub that can actually help you with your backup plans. It can help you make sure that you're failing over properly to the different availability zones. But then we also have partners that can do all of that for you as well. So it's a preference. It depends on what the preference of the customer is, whether they want to use native AWS services, whether they want to build that in-house themselves, or certainly utilizing partner solutions that can automate and accelerate that process for them.
yeah, absolutely. All right, another question here. So with the increased adoption of cloud collaboration tools like G Suite, Microsoft 365, and Zoom, et cetera, what are the most important things for security vendors to pay attention to? I've got a few thoughts here. The first is, around integration with your security tool stack. It's almost impossible to secure something that you have no visibility into and no ability to like do incident response in, for example. And so, I think for security vendors, it's important to be able to get some kind of integration going, right? And with Tines, we can integrate into any HTTP API, and as long as there's something there, right? Like we can do that. But I do think that again, I would almost treat a cloud collaboration tool as any other part of my security stack. To me, the question is, how can I integrate this into my overall sort of cybersecurity posture? And again, like for both vendors and for customers, right? Like these are the things that for example, for us as a vendor, it's a lot easier to go to a platform and say, hey, we have 25 or 50 or 100 customers that are all looking to automate in your platform in this particular way, but you just don't expose that API yet, right? Like vendors such as Tines can actually help, like, we can help consolidate some of those pushes from security teams. And when looking at these SaaS platforms, help engage in those conversations to say, like, your platform needs to incorporate orchestration. It needs to incorporate automation, right? And it needs to be in a standardized API based way, because this is what your customers are looking for. But yeah, Cheryl, any other things that you'd recommend or folks focus on that front?
I agree with everything that you said, and integrating all of those tools in in one platform and single pane of glass. I will also say, just be aware any tools that you use create environment scope and scope creep there. So when you're thinking about your overall security posture, compliance posture, just keep that top of mind, because it could be pulled into your environment or into scope for an audit or assessment as well. So just keeping things in mind of all the tools that you're utilizing there.
Absolutely. Another question came in, with security teams managing increasingly complex tech stacks, how should organizations approach vendor consolidation versus best of breed solutions? Is there an ideal balance? And Cheryl, I might kick that one to you first.
Boy, this is all up to the organization itself. It's if you want to self-manage that, or if you want to use a solution like Tines to really help you automate that process for you. Honestly, I will just tell, having all these disparate areas and having someone focus on managing this and managing that instead of bringing it all together. I usually see the more successful organizations that have, a tool that they're utilizing that can give them the full scope of their environment, so they can manage it all from, really one space or just a couple different areas. It's just easier to triage and keep up with, everything that's going on in your environment.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the easy answer is security teams should have the minimum possible number of tools that are necessary for them to do their jobs. And then the hard part is, okay, well, what is that minimum number, right? And like, how do we actually hit that answer? And I think, to your point, it absolutely does depend on the organization. I think where we try to come in at Tines is being able to say, look, sometimes the thing that the tool does can't be found in any other tool, and you really need it to happen, right? But we can help make it easy to incorporate that into just your day-to-day processes and workflows, so that again, even though the tool itself might be a unique best of breed solution, it shouldn't feel like that, right? For the people that actually have to use the tools, it should actually feel as familiar as and as integrated into their day-to-day processes as the rest of your tooling. So yeah, classic security answer. It depends. I think it's something that organizations just have to be really thoughtful about.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. I think we have time for a couple more questions here. The research shows leaders feel good about work-life balance, but analysts report high burnout. How can security leaders better support their teams? Cheryl, I might throw that one to you.
I think just making sure that you are connecting and have regular cadence with all of your direct reports and everybody on your team, asking them what they need. Are they overwhelmed right now? How can I help? And also the creative outlet, like we were talking about earlier, teams need that in order, they want to be pulled into these conversations because they have really good ideas, and we need to listen to everybody's ideas, and just collaborating and bringing them into those conversations.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, there's no one recipe for burnout. It can come from a lot of different angles. It can come from outside of work, right? There's a lot of different ways that people can end up experiencing burnout. That said, in my experience, what I've seen is that the two factors that are sort of most within a security leader's control are sort of the nature of the work that the team is doing, and their agency over how they get that work done. And this ties back to, I think, just enabling and empowering people to go be creative, right? Security leaders all want to go do creative work. And so why would our teams want anything other than that, right? Like, why would they not want to go do creative things? And so having those strategies to be able to say, you don't have to do this toil anymore, right? And you are empowered to go figure out the best way to solve that toil. To me, I think is a very powerful strategy for addressing some of the root causes of burnout. And again, there's always going to be times where, maybe, a major incident happens, right? And we all put in an 18-hour day. Those things pop up. But how do you support your people after that 18-hour day, and make sure that they have time to rest and recover and come back to work fresh? I think all of these are very important contributors, and ones that leaders actually can do something about, which is the most important bit. All right. Let's see here. Oh, this is a good question. Do you see most companies maturing in security, or does it take a large incident in order to create change in the organization? Cheryl, I'm really curious to see when teams come to you, is it post-incident or is it preventing an incident?
So I've had a little bit of both, but I will say I work from, when I'm talking to early stage startups, sometimes it's definitely not top of mind, and we try to instill that in, this is going to help you scale, to new markets, grab a new customer base. This is what you need to, you need to put your best foot forward. But yes, I have had, we have had others come to us after there's been an incident, right? And then you incur a lot more technical debt because there's a lot of re-engineering that needs to occur on the back end there in order to make sure that, you have those security best practices in place. So having that mindset from the start and just embedding that in your company culture is going to help you, scale tremendously.
Yeah, I think to me, this all boils down to the fact that humans are very bad at understanding risk, and understanding, the odds calculations that are actually being done. And so, I think the bummer is that, yeah, unfortunately, sometimes it takes an incident to make that risk tangible to the leaders and folks that are in charge of investing and making that budget happen. The good news is, these days, well, I guess maybe it's a glass half full view. Glass half full, it is very possible these days to learn from other people's incidents. It doesn't have to be your incident that can make this story tangible for the companies that are, to make the case to senior leadership that it's time to invest in cybersecurity. I think we can also look at some of the regulatory environment and how that is shifting as well. And being able to say, there's increasingly a direct correlation between our ability to do business in the first place and our investment in cybersecurity. So yeah, I think, while it is still pretty common, unfortunately, to see teams investing post breach or post incident, I think there are increasingly, I'm seeing teams increasingly make the case that we can actually map that cybersecurity investment back to business goals, or back to sort of like, again, learning from other people's unfortunate incidents. I think that we have unfortunately run out of time. I know there's a few more questions in the chat, and my apologies that we weren't able to get to all of them. But we're happy to chat afterwards. If you want to reach out to Tynes, we're more than happy to take these questions offline and chat with you about them. If you're interested in reading the full IDC report itself, it's available on our website. Feel free to download a copy. But for now, Cheryl, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed our chat today. It was so much fun having you here.
Thanks for having me, and your insight is just wonderful. So enjoyed having the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks to you everyone for joining. If you joined us a little bit late, there will be a recording, and so you'll be able to get the whole thing available afterwards. In the meantime, thanks everyone for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.